Fernando VII of Spain, nicknamed the Desired, and later the Felon King, is one of those historical figures who seems straight out of a novel filled with palace intrigue and a touch of unintentional comedy. His reign, spanning from 1808 until his death in 1833, with a brief interlude during the Napoleonic occupation, is packed with episodes blending politics, betrayals, revolutions, and, yes, rumors about his private life that have echoed through the centuries. But among all aspects of his life, one has captured the attention of historians, gossips, and the curious alike: the alleged genital macrosomia that, according to chronicles, marked his marital life and, by extension, Spain's politics. This account, combining historical facts with the echoes of legend, seeks to unravel the mystery of Fernando VII, a monarch whose life feels like a script where reality surpasses fiction. Born on October 14, 1784, in San Lorenzo de El Escorial, Fernando was the ninth of 14 children of Charles IV and Maria Luisa of Parma. From a young age, he was hardly the boy who made the ladies of the court swoon. Chronicles describe him as an unattractive youth, prone to obesity, dark-skinned, with a lower lip that seemed to have a life of its own, and a personality oscillating between cunning and indolence. He wasn't the kind of prince who inspired romantic ballads, but rather the one who provoked whispers in the corridors. Yet, his destiny was set. As heir to the throne, he was sworn in as Prince of Asturias in 1789 at the age of 5, at a time when the French Revolution was beginning to shake Europe and unsettle absolute monarchs. Fernando's childhood was no fairy tale. He grew up in an environment of family tensions, with a mother, Maria Luisa, and a favorite, Manuel Godoy, dominating the court of Charles IV. Fernando, who didn't exactly overflow with filial affection for his parents, developed a particular hatred for Godoy, whom the people nicknamed the sausage maker due to his humble origins and meteoric rise. This resentment led him to conspire against his parents' favorite from a young age, aligning with discontented nobles and weaving a web of intrigues that culminated in the Aranjuez Mutiny of 1808. This episode, worthy of a Shakespearean drama with a touch of farce, marked the beginning of his reign. Charles IV was forced to abdicate, Godoy fell from grace, and Fernando, at 23, entered Madrid acclaimed as the Desired. The people, weary of French influence and Godoy, saw him as a savior. Spoiler: he wasn't. But before delving into the juicier details of his private life, it's important to understand the political context. Fernando VII's reign began in a moment of chaos. Napoleon, never one to miss an opportunity to meddle in his neighbors' affairs, exploited the weakness of the Spanish monarchy to intervene. In 1808, after the Aranjuez Mutiny, Fernando was proclaimed king, but just 2 months later, Napoleon summoned him to Bayonne, where, through a mix of pressure and deception, he forced him to renounce the throne in favor of his brother, Joseph Bonaparte. Fernando, along with his father Charles IV and other royals, was confined in Valenque, France, while Spain plunged into the War of Independence against the French. During this time, patriotic juntas and the Cortes of Cádiz governed in his name, and the people idealized him as the Desired, the king who would return to save the nation. The reality, as we'll see, was far less heroic. While Fernando languished in his gilded cage in Valenque, Spain grappled with resistance against the French and the emergence of liberal ideas. The Cortes of Cádiz enacted a constitution in 1812 that limited the king's power and laid the foundations for a constitutional monarchy. It was a revolutionary document for its time, but Fernando, no fan of sharing power, was not in tune with these ideas. When Napoleon, defeated in Europe, signed the Treaty of Valenque in 1813 and allowed Fernando to return to Spain, the king was received with enthusiasm. However, his return marked the beginning of a series of decisions that would earn him the title of the Felon King. Upon setting foot on Spanish soil in 1814, Fernando VII showed his true colors. Instead of accepting the 1812 Constitution, he repealed it with a decree that seemed fueled by years of pent-up resentment. He restored absolutism, dissolved the Cortes, and unleashed fierce repression against liberals, many of whom were imprisoned, exiled, or executed. His government, backed by absolutists like Francisco de Eguía, became an exercise in personal power, where loyalty to the king trumped any principle. This period, known as the Absolutist Sexennium, 1814 to 1820, was a roller coaster of repression, conspiracies, and popular discontent. Fernando, who preferred billiards and revelry to state affairs, delegated to his ministers while scheming to maintain his authority. But Fernando's absolutism didn't last forever. In 1820, a pronunciamiento led by Colonel Rafael del Riego forced the king to swear allegiance to the 1812 Constitution, ushering in the Liberal Triennium, 1820 to 1823. For 3 years, Fernando was compelled to govern as a constitutional monarch, something that, according to chronicles, irritated him more than a tight shoe. While pretending to accept the liberal system, he conspired in the shadows, encouraging absolutists and seeking help from the Holy Alliance powers. In 1823, his strategy bore fruit. The 100,000 Sons of St. Louis, a French army led by the Duke of Angoulême, invaded Spain and restored absolutism. Fernando, freed from the chains of liberalism, unleashed a new wave of repression, executing Riego and other liberal leaders. This episode cemented his nickname, the Felon King, a monarch who betrayed his people and his promises. So far, Fernando VII's story might seem like that of just another authoritarian king, but it's in his private life where the element that has spilled rivers of ink comes into play: his alleged genital macrosomia. According to chronicles, Fernando suffered from a condition that, in modern medical terms, is described as an unusually large penis, described by French writer Prosper Mérimée as thin as a stick of sealing wax at its base, as thick as a fist at its tip, and as long as a billiard cue. This description, more akin to fiction than a historical report, has been cited in numerous sources, from private letters to modern articles. But how much truth is there to this? And, more importantly, how did this condition affect his life and Spain's politics? Fernando VII married 4 times, and each marriage is a chapter in this peculiar story. His first wife was Maria Antonia of Naples, his cousin, whom he married in 1802. The marriage, arranged to strengthen ties between the Bourbon houses, was hardly a passionate romance. Maria Antonia, aged 17, wrote to her mother, Maria Carolina, complaining about Fernando's ineptitude in bed. According to the letters, the 18-year-old prince lacked experience and possibly hormonal maturity, making consummation difficult. The 2 times Maria Antonia became pregnant, in 1804 and 1805, both pregnancies ended in miscarriages, and she died in 1806 of tuberculosis, leaving no heirs. Rumors about Fernando's anomaly were already circulating, though at this stage they were attributed more to his inexperience than a specific physical condition. Fernando's second marriage, in 1816, was to Maria Isabel of Braganza, his niece and daughter of King John VI of Portugal. This marriage was also unsuccessful in terms of reproduction. Maria Isabel, described as sweet but frail, became pregnant twice, but both pregnancies ended in tragedy. The first resulted in a miscarriage, and the second, in 1818, ended with the Queen's death during a complicated childbirth. According to some sources, doctors, believing Maria Isabel had died, began a cesarean to save the baby, only to discover she was still alive. The Queen's scream of pain as she was cut marked one of the most macabre episodes in the Bourbon court. The child, Maria Isabel Luisa, died shortly after. Here, rumors about Fernando's genital macrosomia gained traction, with speculations that internal injuries caused during intercourse may have contributed to Maria Isabel's fragile health. The third marriage, in 1819, was to Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony, a pious and reserved princess. This marriage was, if possible, even more problematic. Maria Josepha, aged 16 at the time of the wedding, was horrified at the idea of fulfilling her conjugal duties. According to chronicles, she suggested praying a rosary instead of consummating the marriage, arguing that Fernando's demands were mortal sin. The situation was so serious that Pope Pius VII had to intervene, sending Maria Josepha a letter reminding her that sexual relations within marriage were not contrary to Christian morality. Despite these efforts, the marriage produced no children, and Maria Josepha died in 1829 of fevers, leaving Fernando, once again, without an heir. By then, rumors about Fernando's condition were an open secret in the court and beyond. It was said that his genital macrosomia not only made sexual relations difficult but caused unbearable pain to his wives, explaining the lack of offspring. The court doctors, in an effort to resolve this state problem, since a king without an heir was a brewing political crisis, devised a solution as ingenious as it was peculiar: a cushion with a hole in the center, a sort of donut that limited penetration and reduced pain. This device, described in various sources, became a legend in its own right, and though the original is not preserved, its existence is a testament to the creativity of 19th-century medicine. Fernando's fourth and final marriage, in 1829, was to Maria Cristina of the Two Sicilies, another niece. Maria Cristina, aware of her husband's reputation, reportedly insisted on using the famous cushion. This marriage, unlike the previous ones, was a reproductive success. In 1830, Isabel, the future Isabel II, was born, followed by Luisa Fernanda in 1832. The arrival of these two daughters marked a turning point but also sparked a new crisis: the succession. In 1830, Fernando, aware he would not have a male heir, repealed the Salic law, which barred women from inheriting the throne, through the Pragmatic Sanction. This ensured Isabel could reign but infuriated absolutists, led by Fernando's brother, Carlos Maria Isidro, who claimed the throne for himself. This conflict gave rise to the Carlist Wars, which bloodied Spain after Fernando's death in 1833. Fernando VII's private life, with its mix of scandal and tragedy, wasn't limited to his marriages. He was a frequent visitor to Madrid's brothels, particularly that of Pepa la Malagueña, and his nocturnal adventures with prostitutes were well known in the court. According to the Marquis of Villaurrutia, Fernando preferred the company of street women to court ladies, often going out disguised with friends like the Duke of Alagon. These escapades, though scandalous, were viewed with some indulgence in an era when royal excesses surprised no one. However, his penchant for sex contrasted with his inability to produce a male heir, further fueling rumors about his physical condition. Genital macrosomia, though not a recognized medical term at the time, became a convenient explanation for Fernando's reproductive issues. Historians like Luis Comenge y Ferrer and writers like Prosper Mérimée cited this condition, based on court testimonies and the difficulties reported by the king's wives. However, these claims should be taken with caution. In the 19th century, medicine was far from an exact science, and court rumors could be exaggerated to discredit an unpopular monarch. Additionally, Bourbon inbreeding, with marriages between cousins and nieces, may have contributed to fertility issues beyond any anatomical anomaly. Politically, Fernando VII was a disaster. His reign was marked by the loss of Spain's American colonies, the repression of liberals, and a ruined economy. His refusal to embrace liberalism and reliance on foreign powers, like France, made him a hated figure for many. Modern historian Stanley G. Payne described him as the vilest king in Spanish history, highlighting his cowardice, selfishness, and lack of vision. However, not all historians are as harsh. Luis del Pino, in an apocryphal autobiography of Fernando, argues that his image has been unfairly demonized and that his decisions, though questionable, were responses to a context of crisis and external pressures. The nickname, the Desired, carries a double meaning that adds irony to his story. Initially, it reflected the Spanish people's hope in a king who would free them from French influence and Godoy. Over time, some have suggested with a sly wink that the nickname might allude to his supposed physical endowment, a quality that, far from being an advantage, complicated his life and that of his wives. In contrast, the nickname, the Felon King, is a reminder of his betrayal of liberal ideals and his people's hopes. Fernando VII's life is a mosaic of contradictions: a king who was cheered and then hated, a man whose private life often overshadowed his political actions, and a monarch whose inability to produce a male heir triggered a dynastic crisis. His reign, full of conspiracies, revolutions, and scandals, is a reminder of how a ruler's most intimate details can reverberate through a nation's history. The genital macrosomia, whether real or exaggerated, became an anecdote that transcended history books to enter the realm of legend, ensuring that Fernando VII, for better or worse, would never be forgotten. Ultimately, the mystery of Fernando VII lies not only in his anatomy but in how a man with so much power could so poorly manage his own and his nation's destiny. His story is a blend of tragedy, comedy, and lessons about the dangers of unchecked ambition and lack of empathy. As historians continue to debate whether he was a villain or merely a product of his time, one thing is certain. Fernando VII, with his perforated cushion and chaotic reign, left an indelible mark on Spain's history, to the delight of the curious and the bewilderment of scholars.